Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Doctors podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by Jill Uchiyama. Jill, really looking forward to this, bearing in mind some stuff you've just been saying before we hit the record button, right?
Me too, Simon.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this for weeks.
You've been thinking about this for weeks, yeah. So the dear listeners will have noticed that we're shifting this focus to healing. And so the conversations are focused on that. And I asked some of the people that I thought were really great at expressing stuff and better than me, right? As I go expressing stuff, you know. And the ones and the people that I thought could really shine a light on this subject of healing and suggested ask them if they'd like to come on and talk about what healing meant to them. So Jill's been on the show before. We'll link to her first interview in the show notes, but today we're going to be talking about healing. So and Jill's done you said you've done how much? You've been doing notes for this for 3 weeks, have you? Something?
Yeah, 3 weeks. Yeah, I love this kind of thing, Simon.
Yeah.
I love the challenge of it. And when you ask these questions, what is healing, which I think is brilliant, honestly, because I don't think we really, I've been a therapist in my lifetime. I have gone to therapy. And this is something I reflected on while I was, really thinking about this question, what is healing? I've actually been to a series of therapists in my life. I've done Al-Anon meetings. I've done EMDR. I've gone to psychics, past life regression, massage therapy, Reiki, acupuncture. I've done all kinds of spiritual retreats, meditation practices, prostrations. I have literally, I could like make a whole list of more, that I've done in my lifetime. And not one person that I've talked to has discussed healing. None of them. Not one therapist has told me what their idea of healing is. Not one. I think it's incredible that we have all collectively decided there are problems. We have problems. And the adoptee community, we've been able to brilliantly define what those problems are. There are so many books written about it now. There are adoptees coming out of the closet, writing memoirs. Everybody's talking about it. But how many people are discussing what healing is? I think some of it is getting through some of the personal stories, but I think that this is such an important topic all the way around. I mean, in the healing communities, in the therapeutic communities, everybody needs to be discussing what is healing. So I am like absolutely practically shaking because we're talking about this. I've spent 3 weeks writing down my ideas of what I think healing is. I mean, I literally have, run marathons. I've walked across Spain on pilgrimage. I have done everything in my life to come to new places in myself. And I was wondering, I was thinking about it, and what makes that something that certain people want to do and other people do not want to do? What is it that compels people to want to heal? And what is their idea of healing? Is it just to feel good? Is that what we're looking for? Is we just want to feel good? Or is it more than that? So I am going to say for myself that my whole philosophy of why I want to heal and be on that healing continuum, because I don't think it's like a ta-da moment and you're healed. It is a process. It's a life process. This life throws a lot at us. There's a lot of unpredictability. There's a lot of trauma going on, even, we're seeing it in our world constantly. So it's not just, we have our adoptee group, but we also have the greater world. We have all these other things going on that are affecting us as well, that are traumatizing. We're being in touch with trauma every day now, through social media, through photos. You get on Facebook and you see a photo that you didn't expect to see. That's extremely disturbing about what's going on in other parts of the world. So this is like we are in this crazy sort of vortex of continuing our healing and also absorbing the pain of the world at the same time, which makes healing even more important. So here's what I came to. And everything I wrote for the last 3 weeks got distilled down to this sentence and sentiment. Well, I don't know if you want me to go straight to the punchline or if I should. Okay, here's the punchline, and then we can go back and fill in the details. What it came to is that the idea of healing for me is equated with loving my life, really loving my life. Okay, what does that mean? So I started to imagine, what if we were walking by a cemetery full of people, and we just absolutely knew that every person in that cemetery, in their graves, lived a life that they loved. What would that be like for us? To think about what it would mean to walk by a graveyard knowing that everybody there loved their lives. Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that have a different energy to it? Wouldn't that be amazing? So I started to think about that idea of really loving your life, all of what it entails, loving it. And then I thought, because, when we talk about peace, for instance, I feel like that word is starting to slip away in a certain way. It's almost like peace doesn't really, it's like outdated or something. It doesn't really hold right now in our world. Like peace, what does that even mean anymore? But what if we replaced it with loving our lives, and then we actually were able to honor the fact that other people love their lives too? What about that? Wow. Wouldn't that bring the most amount of healing that we could possibly think of? You love your life, and I honor the fact that I love my life, and I honor the fact that you love your life. So I just thought, wow, that's it. That to me encapsulates what healing, the whole purpose and mission of healing is.
Yeah. So
because if you don't love your life, no, who will?
Who will?
Who will?
So before we started recording, we ran through the questions that I emailed you, last month or whatever, and I said, "Oh, have you got any more questions?" Right. So before we dive into the answers, but I think you just nailed it. The extra question, which is, why do we want to heal?
Right.
That's
why do we want to heal?
That's the big. Well, the why do we want to heal? And is a big one. And why do we want to heal? Well, because we think we're wounded.
Well, maybe, yeah. Well, but I think wounded or not, we want to heal, and I think I think it's pretty hard to live on this planet anymore without feeling some amount of trauma, whether you're adopted or not.
Yeah.
Trauma is all around us. But what are we healing for? What is it that we're healing? I mean, we could sit around and watch the news and just fall into a despair about the state of the world, or the state of our families, or, but why would we not allow ourselves to do that?
So the other thing that came to me was loving my life, and then there was four words that sprung to my mind as you said that: warts and all.
Right.
Loving my life, warts and all.
That's right. That's right.
So loving our imperfection, being perfect, feeling perfect, despite not being perfect.
That's right.
Feeling grateful, although we have stuff to be ungrateful for. We're working on something. I'm working on something with a fellow adoptee called Jude Conn. She got married last week. I've forgotten her surname. But she's been doing like a month of gratitude, and I've been thinking, on one level, I've been thinking, what a great idea. But on another level, I've been thinking, fellow adoptees aren't going to be liking that, because if you go anywhere near the word grateful, then they think that you're trying to make them grateful. I mean, there's a huge it's oceans apart: spontaneous gratification,
right,
and forced gratification. So spontaneous
Absolutely.
gratification comes from within. And why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we love our life, warts and all? Why wouldn't we be grateful for our life, warts and all?
Right.
Rather than being ungrateful. Why wouldn't do it? But if you're going to tell people, but we're not going to impose gratitude on somebody else, because they're just going to say,
that's right. One of them refers in the adoptee community very specifically to a forced narrative, which is the in the fog narrative of, be grateful. I was just recently I was with my mother, who was living in Indiana in an assisted living. And we were sitting there. She's 91. She has dementia. And we were sitting there watching TV. And what came on the TV, the old movie Annie. I thought, oh, this is apropos. I'd never actually seen it before. So I'm sitting there watching Annie with my mother. And my mother is, got tears in her eyes, and little orphan Annie is tap dancing herself into, her new family's life. And isn't she great? And she has gifts, and she's innocent, and they're going to save her. And I thought in my mind, I bet at the end of this film, there's going to be fireworks. And there were. They did fireworks at the end, like it was Disneyland, And I was like, oh my God, there it is. There's the narrative that my mom, and a lot of adopted parents really, sort of bought into, that as soon as we get her, everything's going to be fine and it's a happy ending. And that's the gratitude narrative that I think adoptees are bristling at. But that shouldn't be confused with the actual honest truth of what gratitude does bring your life. and the spiritual quality of it, the thriving quality of, I mean, the attitude of gratitude is an absolute, it's a science. I'm convinced. I mean, you can't love your life if you're not grateful for it on some level. So I feel like those two things we need to make that distinction that, there's one, but we don't want to talk about that forced narrative.
Yeah. As you said that you were shaking before the conversation, I got a tingle as well, actually, because as we mentioned before, we started recording. I think I've been really, really naive on the amount of hurt there, and you mentioned something that blew my mind, because it's just so far off my own experience and my own well, not my experience, it's just so far off my own philosophy of life. And you said that healing could be annoying,
right?
And I'm just like, what? How?
Yeah. I think that I mean, the way I would say it for myself, and I've felt this way myself, is that there's a part of us that doesn't want to heal. I believe there's a part of us that wants to stay stuck in the muck, wants to stay victimized, wants to stay in this place of inertia. I mean, inertia is real. It's like easier to just sit on my couch and eat Oreos than get up and go to the gym, for instance. It's this place in us that doesn't want to develop. And I think for some people, talking about thriving or focusing on healing, it should be an invitation for everyone to come on in. The water's fine. Find your way with healing. And other people might feel annoyed by it if they're over-identified with the part of themselves that isn't ready to heal or doesn't want to heal or whatever it is. I do think people have to want that. I have known so many people in my life who I'd think, oh, you should go to therapy, and work this thing out, whatever it is. And they were like, no way, not in a million years. Not a million years would I go to therapy. I just heard an interview with Werner Herzog, the Bavarian film director. And he's just written a new book. And he was literally saying in the interview, I would rather gouge my eyes out than go to therapy. I just thought, wow, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who feel that way, who literally are like, not one chance in hell you're going to get me to talk about anything like that. I'll find my own way. But the problem is when you don't ask for help in this life and you have to try to figure it all out on your own, it belabors the problem by like manyfold. It's like you're still talking about the same wounds when you're 50 and you're 60 and you're 70. And maybe this could have moved on from there, if you had started younger. Who knows?
Yeah. Did he feel, as a Werner Herzog, I knew it was some kind of something to do with film. Was one of his reasons because he felt that he would lose his creative edge because there's quite a lot, like tortured souls, so
yeah.
The joke was about Adele, the British singer.
Yes.
If she actually ever was happy in a relationship, she wouldn't sing any she wouldn't be able to make any great songs anymore because they're all about being heartbroken, right? So,
right,
you know,
right, exactly.
And people think that.
Well, though Werner, his feeling was, you know, that's what you have a wife for. You know, you
Oh,
talk to your wife, you talk to your friend, and you work it out, and then you move on.
yeah.
Mhm.
Somebody once said to me, "Yeah, therapy, that's for people that don't have friends."
Right, right.
Yeah, and a friend of mine, again talking about kind of external help, I took over the family business. A lot of my friends have run their own businesses, and a few of them one in particular used to rip the piss out of me for having a coach, of, you know, like for this one, and the sense that you had to figure out himself. And yeah, well, let's say it didn't end well.
Right. Well, you know, I was thinking of all these, you know, that list that I was explaining earlier about the psychic and the past life regression and this and that. And I thought even the most crackpot, you know, like cheap dime store psychic ripoff person that I've worked with, I got something from. You know, there was always something that you kind of walked away with, no matter what or who it was. I mean, I'm not saying there isn't bad help out there, but I just think there's something about having part of loving your life is admitting when you need that helping hand and you need support. And there are just so many people who won't go there.
Yeah.
You know, they just don't want to be that vulnerable, that transparent. I don't know, maybe there's a fear of what they'll find out, or maybe there's a reluctance to growing up or development, you know, because I do think I mean, because once you're healed, like you were saying, you know, recently in your podcast, you're like, well, you're healed, and then what? And I thought, well, you're healed, and then you start being a little bit more aware of other people, you know, and maybe you are a little more available to the world, you know, maybe. Um, maybe you're not as preoccupied with your own wounding, and that frees up your energy to be able to focus on other things.
And lots of people get that in the kind of, let's call it the coaching community, the helping community. Let's call it the helping community. It's a bit broader. So coaches, therapists, whatever. A lot of them have learned stuff and then decided they want to help others. Right? It seems to be part of the path, and it was for me. But it was a spontaneous thing, right? Well, I can, yeah, largely spontaneous. Largely, I had some vague notion once of helping others, but so I was having a conversation with my mentor like 13 years ago, something like that, when I decided I need to get out of the business, and I was thinking, well, what am I going to do? So that question was going around in my head, and then I was chatting to Liz one day, and it just came out of me, like it was a spontaneous thing. She said, I said, I want your job. I want to help other people. And I'd never, and I was, how old was I at that point? 46, 43. And I wasn't one of these people that at 6 wanted to be a doctor, or wanted to be a nurse, or wanted to be a teacher, or go into anything that was about helping anybody.
Right.
That wasn't on my life plan to do that. But a lot of people that find stuff they learn stuff, they want to help other people, and then they find it really impossible, well, very difficult to make a living out of doing that. And so there's this whole industry, online industry, social media people, taking money off those people, telling them that they can make a living by making a difference. And why that is so close to my heart is because that was me, right? Anyway.
Right.
I digress.
No, I think that's such a, I mean, I know in Alcoholics Anonymous, there is that sort of, as you go walking through all these stages, that you get to the place where you start to give back, there is that step where you start to take more responsibility, you start running meetings, you start becoming a sponsor for other people.
Yeah.
It just seems to be baked in to the whole process.
It's baked into the infrastructure of Al-Anon, from what I can tell. And I've only seen it on cop shows, and we're watching ER at the moment, and there's a couple of people who were in Al-Anon. I'm in AA, or not NA actually. I think it's not anyway, but yeah, it's baked in, but it wasn't baked in for my life. It wasn't baked into my culture. But anyway, healing. Yeah.
Loving our life.
Loving our life.
What does that feel like for you?
Loving my life. Well, I had a spontaneous gratitude moment about 5 years ago, when I realized that I was focused on the one thing that I didn't have, right? And the one thing I didn't have was an income from making a difference. That's what it came down to. That's I'd been, and so, but it's in layers, that kind of pain, frustration. That frustration is in layers, but those layers have built up. Those layers have built up over the last, well, they've probably built up over the last 11 years, but they're not so, they're eroding, they're lifting.
Right. The things that you felt that you didn't have before are starting to fall away.
Yeah, woe is me. The world needs to fit with my need to make a living by making a difference. That was
right.
That was the last. That was the holy grail. That was the last fly in the ointment. That was.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and then sometimes, the things that used to really cause that pain do start to fall away as you walk in that healing process. You realize, oh, I don't have the same triggers, or I don't have the same grief as I used to. Things have actually moved forward, and I can feel like, even I was contemplating how, as you move toward healing, and you embrace living life and what that means for you, you can also start to see your whole world change around you. The landscape around you starts to change. Certain people fall away, new people come in, new opportunities that are, we are living in a very dynamic, creative universe. It's not all just happening in our brains. And, and I think that's always surprising and amazing to me, and just validating.
Yeah. So what do you think helps healing happen?
wanting to and getting in touch with a part of yourself that actually wants to heal, that wants to do more, that wants to be of more use in the world, that wants to feel like there is a meaning and purpose in my life, and I'm not here just to go sit on the couch and eat Oreos, like there's something, there are ways I can be useful. I'm not, I'm not the best poet in the world, but maybe one of my poems can inspire somebody else. It's that acceptance of I don't know too. There's kind of that, you go from knowing to not knowing as well. I think that's part of the healing process is, because we don't know what we look like in the next step of our lives or the next development of our self. We don't really know. We might have a vision, but it's going to pan out very differently than what we think it will in our minds. Right. So part of it is letting in that unknown. And that's scary, because everybody wants to control everything. If I stay in my little corner and do what I've been doing for the last 10 years, then I know it'll all stay the same. But if I step out of it, it's going to be a different me, and there's going to be a different world waiting. So I think that's a profound shift from going from I know to I don't know.
Yeah. Something popped back to my head, a conversation with my dad for years ago, like 10, 15 years ago. And we were talking about the fear of failure in business. And this is kind of, it's a bit more fear of failure, right? Fear of failure in business, fear of failure on the healing process. We could do. And he said that he said that for him, fear of failure was a good thing because it kept him on his toes. That's what he said. And I said, yeah, it may have kept you on your toes, but it stop you, to use your phrase, loving your life. I said, didn't it stop you from being happy or something like that? And he didn't say anything, but a tear came to his eye. And it wasn't a guy that cried. But we think that he thought that it was a good thing. I think that sentiment was behind my question when I was asking you about Werner Herzog. Like the creative, the tortured creative soul, that is like Adele. I can't. She can't get married and be happy, because then she wouldn't have any songs about angst that connected with other people who've had their hearts broken.
Yeah. Right. But there's also, there's also the Beatles that sang, I Want to Hold Your Hand. I don't think that was sung out of grief.
No.
I mean, I think art can be joyful. I know it's not a popular opinion, but it has to be. I mean, I hope it has to be joyful too.
I'm just picking the songs that I'm just
right.
picking the scenarios that match the narrative.
Right.
Match our discussion, right?
Yeah.
So it's like statistics. You can find anything if you look long enough. You can find anything, and it's statistics that match the thing. I was just thinking about that creative thing, like, so it was got to what do I do now? Well, yeah, what do I do now? And I loved your because that led us into, well, share you share your learnings. And I think there are adoptee authors out there starting to do this. So they write a memoir and then they embed some learnings in it.
Sure.
Like Emma Stevens and Daniel Godet. There's Daniel Godet's the second half of her book first book is very, very healing, very, very thriving process kind of stuff. But we're starting to do, but we're still talking, we're still calling them memoirs.
Right.
We're not into, we're not, we're still not getting that way. We're still not being obvious about it in books like we are in, like we are on this podcast.
Yeah. I mean, right. I haven't actually read that many memoirs yet, and that's like a whole other thing on my list of things to do. But of course, I'm thinking of writing one myself, but I don't know. Maybe I'll publish diaries instead. I don't know. But it's what do you think? What do you think would be the next step in all of that? As you said, they're not really being obvious about it.
Or being more obvious about it.
Okay.
Being, so I had Joe Soul. Have you heard of him? Joe Soul is in his 80s and 90s. He's a adoptee, really tricky, very horrible start in life. Is a therapist, big noise in New York. He does a lot of meetups and a lot of therapy. And he came on the podcast a long time ago, 2 years ago, something like that. And he just, I hadn't hit record, right? So he just started downloading all this. He started just describing adoptee trauma, and I couldn't get a word in edgeways. And I was thinking, why is he telling me all this?
Mm.
And I couldn't get a word in edgeways. So he finally took a breath. And I said, so is there any hope then, Joe? He said, yeah, of course there is. I said, okay, I'll start recording the podcast now then.
Yeah.
And it like, what? Why? I put something on social earlier today. Does social media ever rub salt in our wound?
Right. I saw that.
Yeah. And everybody came back saying, yeah, happy families, it really cheeses me off, stuff like that.
Right.
And I was, what rubs salt in my wound is being reminded of the wound.
Interesting.
I've only realized that this week.
That's a good one. Yeah. Reminds you of the wound.
It reminds me of the wound.
Uh,
It becomes it's confirmation bias. You've heard of that phrase?
yes. Yes.
So, yeah. How would you describe confirmation bias?
Confirmation bias. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm still back on what you just said a minute ago
Okay.
about, for you, being reminded of, our primal wound is wounding.
Yeah, I'm re-traumatizing myself.
Okay, just thinking of it, just
spending time looking at it. It's
okay.
Yeah, it's like you were talking about headlines. You're talking about watching the news, right? So that's the effect that it has on me.
Okay.
And also
even though it's old news.
it's old news, right?
Yeah.
It isn't new news.
No.
Right.
And also it kind of frustrates me as well.
And that frustrates you because
I'm trying to help everybody heal.
right. But isn't that part of the healing? Is to at least name it first? Yeah.
Yeah. So this goes back to my own kind of experience, which was reading The Primal Wound and then thinking I was stuck with it. So
right.
I did a pretty good job myself of confirmation bias, right? So confirmation bias is what the thinker thinks, the prover proves. So we'll start assigning. I heard that this morning. I was listening to a podcast. Assigning. I thought that's a really great word. Assigning. So I started assigning lots of stuff to adoption. Right. It's another word for saying blaming. Yeah. It's like a positive word for saying blaming. So
okay.
I started blaming adoption on blaming loads of stuff on adoption. And then I was stuck with it. And I did a pretty good job of being stuck with it on my own. And if I had started going into those spaces and looking for validation, it would have made me even worse.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I don't know. I guess I see that as part of the process, though. It's like when you find that shiny new toy or that new definition that sort of no one talked about before. Now it's being talked about. You have to try it on in all these different ways. You have to sort of try on the adoption hat in all these different situations to see if adoption really does it show up here? Does it show up there? I think that's part of the process of that. And then when you get to your place of, okay, I see where it affects me in my life. I see that these certain issues are the ones I've been carrying for a long time. Now I can move forward because I know what that is. I've named it.
I love that, because what we're saying, it fits with the warts and all thing.
Right.
We're loving being triggered. So I am seeing being triggered as a space to grow from.
That's right. And you can actually be grateful for the trigger.
Yeah.
Which sounds very, contradictory from a certain place. When the trigger is unconscious, you're not grateful for it. You're tormented by it. But once you have that consciousness and you understand where that trigger comes from, now you can be grateful for it because it's come up. And now you can actually, objectify it. You don't have to be so affected by it that it takes over. You're actually in the driver's seat at that point, and you can actually objectify the trigger, and you understand why it's there. And I think that is another form of healing, is understanding where these triggers are coming from, where some of the difficulties we've had in our lives have come from. But you can't do it if you're in the fog. That's impossible, because you're not even claiming it at that point. You're in denial that it's even there. So you're acting out of unconscious wounding. So we go from unconscious wounding to being conscious of our wounding. That's a completely different place to operate from.
Wow. So have you got more on your notes?
Have I got more?
Yeah.
Yes. I talked a lot about acceptance and how that was so pivotal for me in my process of healing. And I learned that lesson on the Camino de Santiago when I was walking across Spain, because I literally had pain every day. I mean, some people are like, oh, that was a difficult day. The entire thing was a difficult day for me. I had tendonitis and I was limping and whimpering, but I kept going and I finished. And I had some real breakdown moments where all of the pain of my life I felt was being I stopped fighting against it, you know. And that stage of acceptance, which I know Kubler-Ross has their model, and we said we weren't going to talk about psychological models, but I do think that is the pivot between being embedded in despair, depression, anger, blaming, bargaining, all of those levels of struggle, and more of a place of freedom and a place where love can come through.
Yeah.
Because it really is the shift. There is a real shift from feeling suicidal. I mean, talk about not being in touch with loving your life, to a place of acceptance. And that's where the love, I think, comes in. It's love for your life, love for being alive and being embodied to feel that love, because we block it. You know, we are blocked in other stages, which I call lower stages, you know.
Yeah. Or the ego blocks it, yeah.
Yeah, the ego, that broken ego. We do have to fix the ego. I mean, it does have to develop and heal in order for I never felt that way when I was in a spiritual community. I had a teacher who literally said, none of you will go to therapy. We are not wasting our time with that. You know, if you just live my teachings of freedom, you won't need therapy. And that is complete horseshit. It was not true. It wasn't even true for my teacher. It's not true for anyone and I've worked with nuns who need therapy. Let me tell you, there are a lot of people out there spiritually bypassing. And you do need to heal your ego. It is a real thing. There, you know, you have to take care of this. Suzanne Cook-Reuter is an amazing psychologist at Harvard. She's done incredible work with Ken Wilber and the integral community. And that was one of the first things she said after I left my spiritual community. She's like, you people cannot bypass fixing and healing your ego and developing it. You have to do it alongside of your spiritual development. So I thought that was a really important lesson, because I really poo-pooed therapy for many years. Then I had to go back and do it. But what were we talking about? So healing as a form. So we're talking about getting in touch with loving our life. There's actually, I think when your ego does heal and you are healing and moving forward, there's more of an excitement for life. You know, there's like a freedom that opens up, you know, and you start to become aware that it's actually a cool thing to be alive, even in this crazy effed up world. It's a great thing to be here because we can do something. As long as we're living, breathing people, we can actually try to do something every day and try to help heal the brokenness of the world. We're trying to
we do it through healing our broken selves. You know, you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first and all of that. But the point is so that you can be available to help others. And that's my take on why it's important to heal. Otherwise, you end up being someone that other people have to take care of. And is that who you want to be?
So what gets in the way of us healing, you think?
What gets in the way of healing? What do you think?
Well, I came up with this idea. You know, we've got this idea of mindset, right? Well, I think it would be better to have a mind fluid or a mind open.
Right.
Set is like concrete is set. It's set in stone. You know, we become men in the UK become grumpy old men. We've become set in our ways. So our behavior, we're set in our minds, so we can become set in our ways because what's going on in our head drives what. So for me, what stops us being set in stone, our beliefs. Our beliefs stop us healing. And that's why you used the word shift a few times. And I think healing comes in shifts. Healing comes in shift moments. And have you ever done any economics when you were at school or college? Well, there's a movement along the demand curve, and then there's a shift of the demand curve, and a shift of the demand curve is far more profound than a movement up or down. So a shift, an insight, belief. So one of the things I've been talking about quite a lot recently is, to me, in the personal development world, and which I spent a lot of time in, and business development world. So you did all those different things, Reiki. I've done some Reiki, but you listed a whole load of
healing technologies.
So I haven't done as many of those as you, but what I've done is loads of business technologies, and including mindset stuff. And in one of my fascinations is how the anguish of being abandoned becomes a belief that we're not good enough. The anguish of abandonment, belief that we're not good enough. Our brain is making some connections there, those neural pathways, whatever, right? It's a belief. And in the adoptee community, we talk all the time about trauma and very little about belief, although the belief that there's something wrong with us is at the center of most, and it's not just adopted people, clearly, most people in the world, but in adopted people's life, we don't believe that we're good enough. We don't believe we're good enough. So in my case, she didn't love me enough to effing keep me. She gave me effing.
Right.
So there's I can put that not good enough on her, externalize it, or I can internalize it and say there's something wrong with me. And I've done both.
Right.
But it's a belief. So a belief, well, what's a belief made of? A belief is made of thoughts. A belief is made of neural pathways that have wired together. What do they say? As the things wire together. So beliefs stop us healing, and therefore busting belief is the key driver of our healing. And it doesn't matter what the technology is, and I love your word, that technology. It doesn't matter. It's whatever works. So does walking in nature, does that shift your belief?
Yeah.
Reiki, does that shift your belief? Listening to a podcast, does that shift your belief? Listening to a chat with a therapist, does that? Somatic breathing things, does that shift? What is it that shifts for you?
Yes, I think what has shifted for me is the practice of through relationship. I mean, I recently went to the Harvard Divinity School for a program on, it's called Making Change, and they do it every summer. And our topic that we delved into for 1 week was on friendship, and it was friendship and a life worth living. So we read a ton of text from Buddhist, we read Colin McCann's book, A Paragon, which is a powerful, powerful novel, but it's based on a true story. And in fact, we're still meeting with him on Zoom calls recently because he's done a lot of work. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he wrote a book, he's an Irish writer who wrote a book about a Palestinian man and an Israeli man who both lost their daughters in that conflict. This is well before October 7th. And they came together in friendship, formed a parenting circle group. And there are lots of groups that have been formed. But he knew that these groups worked because he was also, I think, part of, he saw what happened in Ireland and never believed that, the IRA. And so this whole thing works, right? We can bring opposing groups together. It seems miraculous, but it works. What is the key ingredient? This is what I think healing comes in. The key ingredient is friendship and deep listening. And you listen to my story, I listen to your story deeply. We get to know each other and that level. There's empathy, there's compassion, there's healing. I think that busts beliefs. And that's the quickest thing I can think of that would bust those individual beliefs of I'm not good enough. How can you not be good enough when you're sitting in front of a friend who's literally giving you all of their presence and attention? It's that deep listening that in that space between us busts the beliefs. That's what I think. And I've been in groups for many years. I was in groups in my spiritual community. We called it enlightened communication. That's like a whole other story, but it is about deep, getting to know somebody, being a friend. And through these adoptee groups, I mean, this is why I think these adoptee social groups that meet in person are so powerful, because that's exactly what they do. We get together, we have dinner, and we listen deeply to each person and where they're at and what they have to say. We don't make them wrong. We don't correct them. We don't try to fix them. We just stand in the presence of that other human being. And through the process of that, we all walk away feeling a lot more uplifted. That's what I think busts the beliefs. So I encourage everyone out there in adoptee communities or form one. Adoptees Connect is wonderful. We're meeting tomorrow. And one of the people I know you've had on your show, Greg Gentry, he's actually coming to my Thanksgiving dinner tonight. So, I mean, it's fantastic. And that's because of you, Simon. You actually connected us through your podcast, and now he's having Thanksgiving with us. So thank you for being part of our table.
You're welcome. There's so much I could say there, but I can hear my dog whining to go out.
Yes.
And it's the frustration, right? It's a little bit of frustration. You know, we're trying to put the world to rights, and then a dog needs a wee. You know, like this. You know,
Yeah.
so you can love. So I'll be thinking about that, loving my life, warts and all. Yeah, crying puppies and all.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank
Fantastic.
you. Yes, this was wonderful. Always a pleasure. I hope to see you in April.
Yeah, you will do.
Okay.
Thanks, listeners. Speak to you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.